What is up, Speezinators? I'm your host, Nathan Spees, and welcome to my Louisville Zoo tier list. Now, for those of you who don't know what a tier list is, it's this chart where you rank things. You can rank them from S tier to F tier. It's basically the modern way of ranking something from best to worst. And I'm going to be doing that with the exhibits at my local zoo, the Louisville Zoo. Now, I should clarify that these are my opinions, so maybe your opinions are going to be different than my opinions. And, if you have different opinions, that's fine. But these are just my opinions, so don't get mad at me if you disagree with something that I say. Maybe I like an exhibit that you hate, or you hate an exhibit that I like. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started with the Louisville Zoo tier list, starting with the first exhibit section. First up is Penguin Cove, home to the little blue penguins. This exhibit is pretty good. I'm giving it an S tier, simply because not only is it a really good exhibit, but also it's got really nice theming, and yeah, I just like it. I will say though, I wish it was a little bit bigger, but that's a very minor complaint. And for what it is, it's really good, so I'm giving it an S tier. Next are the Aldabra Tortoises. This one is getting an A tier, simply because it is slightly, just very slightly showing its age, but it is still a really good exhibit. It's got lots of space for the tortoises, lots of sand and rocks, and the only reason why I'm not putting it in S tier is because I wish the pool area was a little bit bigger, because the tortoises don't really have that much water, and the water really only seems to be there for the ducks and swans, but it is still a nice exhibit. I'm giving it an A tier. Next up is the Island's Rotational Exhibits. The Louisville Zoo was actually the first zoo in the entire United States to implement animal rotations for the 5 animals that they have, which are the Malayan tapirs, babirussas, Siamang apes, orangutans, and Sumatran tigers. This is going in the B tier, simply because while it is really awesome and really cool, some of the exhibits are starting to show their age. And, they're not as impressive as they were back in 1995. But they're still kind of impressive and very well themed. Next up is the Islands Pavilion, which is the indoor portion of the Islands exhibit. This one's actually going in A tier because this one's actually really cool. So all the exhibits inside are very well sized for the birds and the bats. And the day room is a really nice area to go in. It's kind of quiet and peaceful. And the aviary, while I don't like birds too much, the aviary is pretty nice. The one thing I will say though, it's very easy to get pooped on in there, so I have to go through there pretty fast so I don't get pooped on. And the penguin area is a little bit small, but it's not that bad. The penguins are in a decent sized exhibit. The porcupine is also in a nice sized exhibit, and so is the crocodiles. So we're putting it in the A tier. Not as good as Penguin Cove, but still, nicely done. Next up is the Herp Aquarium. I'm going to go ahead and rank this a B tier, simply because it's really nothing too special. It's just a normal reptile house and aquarium. The main things that stand out about this is the Komodo dragon exhibit, which is very large and spacious, as well as King Louie the rare white alligator. Now yes, I know Louisville is not the only zoo that has a white alligator. Heck, Newport Aquarium has 2 of them. But King Louie still holds a special place in my heart, even though a lot of people think he's dead or he's fake. He's not fake, guys. I've seen him move. As for the other exhibits, they're really nothing too special. They're just typical reptile tanks. Some of them are a little bit small and some of them are a little bit dirty, but that's really just a minor complaint. And they do have some really cool species in there. And also, the building was recently just renovated to make it a little bit more colorful and interactive. So that's a plus. And so that's why I'm going to give it a B tier. Next up is the Meta Zoo, which is the Louisville Zoo's educational building. This one is also going in an A tier because, while it's not as good as the Islands exhibit, it is still a really nice building. I haven't actually been in this building too much, so I don't know the full layout, but when I went to the zoo a couple days ago, I actually did go inside this building, and it is a lot nicer than I thought. It's got a lot of your typical domestic animals and like native wildlife like possums, armadillos, chinchillas, and of course I cannot forget to mention the black-footed ferrets, which the Louisville Zoo has been breeding and helping to rehabilitate and release them into the wild. So I gotta applaud them for that. So that's why it's going in A tier. Now we're moving on to the South America portion of the zoo, starting with the maned wolf exhibit. Now I have problems with the maned wolf exhibit, and that's why I'm giving it a B tier. While yes, it is a very nicely sized exhibit, it's very large, you can't really see the maned wolf too well from the viewpoints you're given. I feel like the exhibit is a little too big for the maned wolf. I mean, there's a lot of tall grass and large hills that makes it very hard to see the maned wolf. I mean, through all the times I've been visiting the Louisville Zoo, I've probably only seen the maned wolf like 8 times. He barely comes out at all. So that's why he's going in the B tier. Next up is the Cats of the Americas section. This one's going straight down to D tier. Simply because it's very outdated. Like, the exhibits in there are pretty outdated, and they're really small. The puma area is really tiny for the puma. The lynx area is actually not that bad, but it is kind of hard to see the lynxes from the deck, and also there's a lot of plants in front of the exhibit that makes it really hard to see the lynx. Not to mention the color of the rocks matches the color of the lynx. The one good thing I will say about this exhibit is the bald eagle area. The bald eagle area is really nice. It's open top, which is kind of rare for bird exhibits, but that's because the bald eagle that's in this exhibit was actually donated by the US government because it was injured out in the wild and it cannot be released back into the wild and it cannot fly. So that's why it's here at the zoo. That's the only saving grace of this exhibit. Without it, it will be going straight down to F. But for now, I'm putting it in D tier. Next up is the Flamingo area, and this is going in the B tier, simply because it's a nicely sized exhibit, it's very spacious for the flamingos, and I like the inclusion of the crested screamers and the new additions, which are the pelicans. But I will say, the lake area, the water for the flamingos is a little bit far away from the viewing area, and sometimes the flamingos are off in the distance and it's kind of hard to see them. And also there's a lot of trees in the way, so that's why it's going in the B tier. Nice exhibit, but could use a little work. Next up is the new sloth exhibit. This one's going up into S tier. I love this exhibit. This exhibit was originally the old snow leopard exhibit, which was horrible for the snow leopard. But then they moved the snow leopard out and gave it its own exhibit, which we will talk about later, and they decided to put the sloths in the old snow leopard exhibit. But that's not all that they did. They decided to add some plants and trees, make it look a little bit more well-suited for a sloth, and they added the indoor area, which is where the sloths spend most of their time. And yeah, I love this exhibit. I loved how they took a really bad, outdated exhibit and made it a really good exhibit. So that's why I'm going to put it in S tier. Not to mention the sloths have their own Twitter page. Next up is the Jaguar. The Jaguar is going back down into D tier, along with the other cats. The Jaguar exhibit is a little bit better than the Cats of the Americas exhibit, but it's still not that good. The exhibit is a little bit too small, and you can't really see the Jaguar from the cage, especially when it's in the back of the exhibit. It's really hard to see, and it's also very dark and very shadow heavy. So that's why I'm putting it in the D tier. Sorry, Jaguar. Next up is the Hyacinth Macaw cage. This is going straight down into F tier. This exhibit is terrible. The cage is so outdated. The cage is so small for these birds. It's very rusty and not really well maintained. So I'm putting this straight down into F tier. But interestingly, when I visited the zoo a couple days ago, I saw there were construction walls around the exhibit. So maybe it'll change the next time I visit. But I'm not so sure about that. We'll just have to wait and see. Next up are the Guanacos, which are the llamas. This exhibit is going in the C tier. Simply because it's a very nice sized exhibit, but I feel like it's a little bit too big. And also, it's up on a hill, so it's really hard to see the guanacos sometimes, so yeah, there's no binoculars either, so that's why I'm gonna put it in the C tier. And also, the water area was dried up, and so it just looked really bad. And I do miss the rheas that used to be in the exhibit, so that's why it's going in the C tier. Alright, now we're moving on to the Australia section. So we're going to start with Wallaroo Walkabout. This one is going in the B tier, simply because I like Kentucky Down Under's kangaroo exhibit way better than the Louisville Zoo exhibit. That's not to say the exhibit is bad, but it's a little bit small for the wallabies and the emus, and also the kookaburra and the tawny frogmouths are in a really outdated cage. But I mean, for the wallabies, it's a nice size. That's why it's going in B tier. Still a nice exhibit, though. Next up is Lorikeet Landing. Now, I haven't actually been in this exhibit because I am terrified of birds, but judging from the videos and pictures I've seen, as well as the exterior, I'm also giving this a B tier. It's way better than Kentucky Down Under's Lorikeet area, but I still feel like there's room for improvement. But I do like the theming, Rainbow Springs, and the big windmill. I do like those. So I'm going to put this in B tier. Alright, now we're moving on to Glacier Run, starting with the Snow Owl exhibit. This one is going in the A tier, simply because I wish there was an outdoor area for the snow owls, and also the glass area that's inside their exhibit. It's got like some weird mesh material on it that makes it hard to take pictures and such. And it's also kind of hard to see them with that weird material. So that's why it's going in A tier. If it didn't have all that, it's a nice exhibit. I do like it. So that's why I'm not giving it below A. I'm keeping it in A tier. Next up is the Stellar Sea Eagle exhibit. This one is absolutely going in S tier. I love this exhibit. It's got a nice big tree for the eagles, and it's got lots of nice greenery and nature. I just like it. It's also a way better improvement over their old home in the Giraffe House. More on that later. Speaking of the eagles and Glacier Run, let's just talk about Glacier Run as a whole. This includes the polar bears, grizzly bears, and seal and sea lion area. All of this is going right up to S tier. This is easily the best exhibit in the entire zoo, period. Not only that, this is probably the best polar bear exhibit in any zoo I've ever seen. It's got so much great theming. I love the story behind Glacier Run. I love all the rotational parts. I love the overhead catwalks for the polar bears. And I love the exhibit sizes and the pools. And the seal area is also really cool with the little deck and how they have lots of room to swim around and sit on rocks. I love it. It's going right up to S tier. Best exhibit in the entire zoo. Alright, now this one, I'm not sure if this counts as an exhibit because it's not listed as an exhibit, but it's listed on the map, so that's why I'm putting it on here. That's the crane exhibit. It's going down to F tier. I'm sorry guys, I'm putting it in F tier. Just because it's technically not an exhibit, but it's also kind of an exhibit. There's no like signage, there's no viewing areas, there's not even any indication that it's an exhibit. They're just kind of there. Really, the only way you could see them is if you went on the train, which unfortunately they don't have trains anymore. So there's really no way to see them down there. That's why I'm putting it in F tier. Next up we have one of the newest exhibits, Snow Leopard Pass. This one is going up into S tier, just because it's such a great improvement over the old Snow Leopard exhibit. I love the theming. Not as good as Glacier Run's theming, but still really good theming. I love the giant rock structures and all the climbing areas for the leopard, and I love the overhead catwalks. Actually, every time I've seen this exhibit, the snow leopard has been in the exact same spot. I guess it just likes it there. But yeah, putting this in S tier. S for snow leopard. Next up we have what's probably my favorite exhibit in the entire zoo, which is another great cat exhibit, Tiger Taiga. This one's also going into S tier. Not just because it's my favorite animal, but also, it's a really nice sized exhibit, very large, very spacious, perfectly suited for a tiger, lots of viewing areas, and a nice pool. But I do wish the pool was actually closer to the viewing areas, because it would have been cool to see the tiger splashing around in the window, but that's just me. So yeah, this is definitely going into S tier. S for Siberian tiger. Alright, now we're moving out of the Glacier Run / Asia area and going into the African portion of the zoo. Starting with Hippo Falls, home to the pygmy hippo. This one I'm giving a B tier, simply because, while it is a nice sized exhibit, it's just a little bit small. Not like, teeny tiny, but still kind of small. And also, it's a little bit steep for the hippo. I feel like the hippo would have trouble getting down off the rocks. And also, speaking of the rocks, some of the rocks, depending on where you're viewing, the rocks make it really hard to see the hippo. So I wish they didn't have that, and I wish you could see the hippo easily. But other than that, it's a nice exhibit. I'm giving it a B tier. Alright, next up we have what's probably the star attraction of this area, the Gorilla Forest. This one is definitely going in S tier. Gorilla Forest is amazing. It's very well themed, lots of shade, lots of really cool plants, and lots of fun theming. I love how they have 2 areas for the gorillas, a very large outdoor space, a slightly smaller outdoor space, and then the indoor portion, which is called the Gorilla Sanctuary. This building is also really well themed. I love all the viewing areas of the gorillas, lots of climbing structures. Very nicely done exhibit. And also, Jelani is awesome. This one's definitely going in S tier. Now we're moving out of Gorilla Forest and going into the proper African section, which is home to the meerkats. Now the meerkat area is actually one of the newer areas of Africa. It opened in 1999. I'm going to give it a B tier. Just because, while it is a nice exhibit, there is some things that I would improve with this exhibit. The indoor portion of the meerkat area is a little bit weird. And also, I feel like the glass area, like the glass fence, is a little bit too low. And people are like always throwing stuff at them. Don't ever do that, guys. Do not ever throw food at the animals. It's not funny. They're on very strict diets, and whatever you throw at them could easily kill them. So please don't do that. That's why it's going in B tier. Although it was really cute when I went the other day and I saw the meerkat chasing a bug. Definitely giving me Timon vibes. Next up is the naked mole rat area. This one is getting an A tier. Simply because there's nothing really too special about it. It's just a standard naked mole rat exhibit. But there are 2 areas for the naked mole rats to go in, so they have a lot of room. And also it gets you out of the sun and into the shade, which is nice. Next up we have another new exhibit, Colobus Crossing, home to 2 different types of monkeys. Now, if I did this tier list a couple months ago, I would have put this in S tier. But I have to give it an A tier because of one incident. A couple of months ago, one of the colobus monkeys actually escaped from the exhibit. Now, it didn't break out of the zoo, but it broke out of its exhibit. And so because of that, I have to give it an A tier because there's something wrong with the exhibit. I don't know if it's a major thing or if it's a minor thing. If it weren't for that incident, I would give it an S tier, but for now, I'm giving it an A tier. This next area isn't really an exhibit, but I'm still counting it on this tier list because it has animals, and that is the Bulma African Petting Zoo. Now, I don't really go into the petting zoo all that much because something about sharing the same space with an animal kind of makes me nervous, especially if it's like a goat or something, I might get attacked. But I will say for the exhibit, I'm going to give it an A tier. Just because it's really well themed. I like the African themed, and all the goats in there are African goats. But I do wish that they still had donkeys and tortoises. They do have ponies, but they're only there for rides. They're not there for petting. But yeah, I wish they could have a few more animals, not just goats, but yeah, I do like this area. That's why it's going in A tier. Alright, now we're getting to the star animals. Next up are the zebras. Now the zebra exhibit I'm going to put in the B tier. Just because it's very big and very spacious, lots of room for the zebras to run around. And there's lots of grass areas and sand. But I do think that there's a little bit too much gravel. And, not enough grass and sand. But, yeah, if they took away some of the gravel, it would probably be ranked a little bit higher. But, and also, the viewing areas are kind of limited. Like, you have the car, which is nice. I love the car. But some parts of the exhibit you would have to stand on like a bench to see the zebras. And also, depending on where you view, they're very far away and it's hard to get pictures and all that. So that's going in B tier. Still a good exhibit though. Alright, here comes the most popular and the most controversial part of the entire zoo and probably the entire video. The elephant exhibit. Now, I love the elephants, and I love the elephant exhibit, but I'm not going to ignore the problems it has. Now, if I was a normal zoo fanatic, or if I didn't live in Louisville, I would probably give this an F tier. But I don't think it deserves an F tier, guys. I swear. This elephant exhibit does not deserve F tier. It's not that good, but it does not deserve F tier. You see, what Louisville lacks in their elephant exhibit size, they make up for in their really good elephant care. They provide lots of enrichment, lots of nutrition. You know, the elephants are happy and healthy there. And you know, I have a very big soft spot for Mickey, Punch, and Fitz. So I'm going to give it a D tier. Only because there are far worse elephant exhibits out there than Louisville's. Louisville's is just very mediocre. Next up we have the camels. And this one is pretty easy. I'm just going to put this in C tier. Just because there's nothing really too special about it. It's just camels. And also, the camels are really only there to give rides to people. Which, I wish it was just a normal camel exhibit that didn't offer rides, but hey, I'm not in charge of the zoo, am I? So yeah, I'm going to have to give it a C tier just because I don't get excited by it, and also, I wish they didn't do the rides, but, you know, that's just me. Next up, we have another controversial Louisville Zoo African exhibit. Not as controversial as the elephants, but still somewhat controversial. The lion exhibit. Now, I do love the lion exhibit, and yes, it has some very noticeable flaws, but it is better than the elephant exhibit. A lot of people complain that the lions don't have any access to the ground, which is completely false. They do. They can get off the rock just fine and go into the grass, but they choose not to because they're cats. Cats prefer to be on elevated ground. Just ask my cats. No matter how much floor space I give them, they always choose to stay up on my bed. Or in their cat tree, or whatever. And also, I just love the way the rock design looks. It reminds me of Pride Rock from The Lion King. And it's just, it's got so much charm to it. There's almost nothing negative I can say about it. So I'm going to give it a C tier. Next up, we have the giraffe exhibit. This one is going into the A tier. Just because the giraffe exhibit is really big, really spacious for the giraffes, lots of plants, lots of trees, a nice little watering hole area for the giraffes, and also there's a nice area to feed the giraffes. I will say the only negative things about this exhibit is that the fencing's a little outdated, and also there's a lot of concrete structures in the exhibit, and I'm not really a big fan of that. That's why it's going in the A tier, but it's still a really good exhibit, probably the best one in the whole section. Next up, we have the Adx Antelopes. This one is also going in the A tier. It's a really nice exhibit, very large, very spacious, lots of room for the Adxes to roam around in, lots of dirt and sand for them to lay around, lots of grass for them to eat. Yeah, nothing really much to say about this exhibit. Really good. A tier. Next up, we have another antelope from Africa, the Eastern Bongo. The Bongo exhibit is going into the B tier. Not as good as the Adx exhibit, but it's still a nice exhibit. I will say though, it's a little bit too shaded. Sometimes it's really hard to see the bongos when they're sitting under the trees. And also, this exhibit originally housed ostriches and gazelles, and I really miss the ostriches and gazelles. I'm more of a fan of those than I am of the bongos, so that's also kind of what's making them go into B tier. But it is still a really good exhibit, and there are some things I would improve with it. Oh yeah, and I forgot they also share the exhibit with vultures and cranes. So, for that, it's a really nice exhibit. It's going in B tier. Now we move on to the Giraffe House. Not the Giraffe Exhibit, but the Giraffe House. This is the building that the giraffes go into at night when the zoo closes. but there's also a few exhibits in there. For example, you have the Ibis exhibit, which was actually the old serval exhibit, which I do really like. It's well suited for the birds. I like the little building that's in there. And then you have the Hyrax exhibit, which I don't really like too much because it looks kind of outdated, not as natural, and, it's just a little bit weird for the Hyraxes, but, considering the Hyraxes, what animal they are, it's a nice exhibit. And then for the giraffe area, which is where the giraffes go to at night, this area is decent. It's got a lot of feeding structures and a little bit of enrichment for the giraffes, but it looks a little too much like a prison cell. But the giraffes can still easily get around, and they're not cramped in here. But I wish it didn't look too much like a prison cell. So that's why this whole building is going in the C tier. That and the Hyrax exhibit. Next up we have the Rhino exhibit. This one is also going in the C tier. Just because it's slightly better than the elephant exhibit, but it's still kind of outdated for the rhinos. Not to mention they only let one rhino out at a time, when back in the day they used to have 2 or 3 of them out. Nowadays they only have 1 out. I do like how you can get really close to the rhino depending on what viewing area you go to. They have lots of sand, lots of rocks, lots of mud for them to lay around in. But there is a lot of concrete, lots of outdated structures. It's just kind of there, It's got good things and it's got bad things. That's why it's going in the C tier. Next up we have the Waddled crane exhibit. This one is going in the F tier. Okay, the only reason it's going in the F tier is because it gets ignored. Like, the Louisville Zoo doesn't ignore them, but the exhibit gets ignored by a lot of people because it's just kind of in a weird area. It's right by the Giraffe House, and it's easily missed. And also, sometimes they park vehicles in front of it and other stuff that blocks the view of the crane, so yeah, it's also just, kind of bare. Nothing really big is in there. That's why I'm going to give it an F tier. Next up, we have the Warthog exhibit. This one is getting an A tier. This is a really nice exhibit. Very well suited for the warthogs. Lots of shelter areas, lots of mud. And yeah, there's nothing really much to say about this exhibit. I like it. It's going in the A tier. And last but certainly not least, we have the Ghosts of Madagascar exhibit. The Ring-tailed Lemur exhibit. Which originally was a giant rock. But then, just recently, a year ago, they trimmed down the rock and they added more trees and more climbing structures, to make it look more natural and a little bit more well suited for the lemurs. And yeah, I will say, this improvement is really good. Although I still think there should be a little bit more work done to it. Maybe they could add some water, maybe they could add even more plants, more trees, more climbing structures. But for what it is, it's really good. So I'm going to give it an A tier. And that's my tier list, guys. Oh wait, since there's 39, I'm going to add one bonus. One bonus animal. And that bonus is Leroy and Miles, the Louisville Zoo mascots. They're going in S tier. Love them. Nothing really much to say about them. Love them. Going in S tier. And that's my tier list, guys. What did you think of it? Do you like it? If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. Please like, share, and subscribe. And comment down below if you agree or disagree with this tier list. Maybe make your own tier list of your local zoo. Or, maybe suggest some changes. And, yeah. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.